It's undeniable that The Lord of the Rings is rather man-forward. For example, every member of the Fellowship is male, that's all 9, and then you get probably like 3 main female characters, and that's pushing it. Every villain is also male, except one, and she's only recognizably female in the Shadow of War video game. But that means that major female characters, like Éowyn, really stick out. And what makes it all the more fascinating is that Éowyn's character arc doesn't shy away from the idea of masculinity versus femininity. It tackles head-on the idea of trying to find your place as a female in a male-dominated society. And these are issues that, unsurprisingly, didn't get discussed a lot by authors of Tolkien's ilk. Her character and her arc are one of the most complex and easily misunderstood parts of The Lord of the Rings, something that is only muddled further by her interpretation in the Peter Jackson films. So today, I'm going to be diving deep into the nuances of Éowyn's character, discussing the changes that were made from book to movie, and talking about where these worked and where they failed. The best place to start, of course, is with her character introduction, which, in the books, is an incredibly striking moment. Éowyn arrives just after Gandalf has driven the darkness out of Theoden, and she looks upon her uncle with cool pity in her eyes. Thus Aragorn, for the first time in the full light of day, beheld Éowyn, Lady of Rohan, and thought her fair and cold, like a morning of pale spring that has not yet come to womanhood. And now she was suddenly aware of him, tall heir of kings, wise with many winters, grey-cloaked, hiding a power that yet she felt. For a moment, still as stone she stood, then turning swiftly, she was gone. It's a brief introduction, but already it does a great deal of work in establishing her character. She is youthful, but remote. Beautiful, but very stern. We're also able to see how immediately stricken she is by Aragorn. She's drawn to his kingly power, to his strength. In the films, however, we meet Éowyn in a much more intimate moment, as she informs Theoden of the death of his son. Through barely restrained tears, she begs Theoden to look upon Theodred, his son, but he's too far gone to even recognize her. From there, we're catapulted further into her grief, watching from the sidelines as she weeps over her cousin's body, alone except for the lurking shadow of Wormtongue. The instantaneous intimacy generated by having our first scenes with this character be her sobbing and begging at one of her lowest points calls the audience to empathize with Éowyn from her very first scenes. Through this scene, without needing any of it to be spoken out loud, we immediately understand the plight of her kingdom. An inept king, a dead cousin, a missing brother, and a corrupt advisor. The books were able to use the space and time that we get in a text to just explain this to us, but the movies elegantly show us rather than telling us this information. The books tell us that she is grave and thoughtful, whereas the movies show us that she is pleading and pitiful. It's not that her sorrow isn't earned, that I don't understand why she is so upset, it just immediately sets her as being more soft and less icy than the book character. Wormtongue creeps in behind her in this moment of weakness, faking sympathy with a sickly sweet tongue. He borrows a line from the book, saying she is
so fair, so cold, like a morning of pale spring still clinging to winter's chill.
In the books, this line is delivered by a third-person narrator, and it's implied that it's coming from Aragorn's POV. It comes across as complimentary, if not a little bit pitying. Éowyn is pale, but she is strong. She's cold, but she is still beautiful. By reframing this as coming instead from Wormtongue's poisoned lips, it reads as far more manipulative. In the movies, she hasn't shown herself to be cold thus far, as Wormtongue calls her. In fact, we've only seen her be quite warm and sympathetic. Wormtongue isn't saying that she's cold as a character trait, but accusing her of being cold to him. It's like when you're walking down the street and a random person tells you should smile more. It was an effective choice in the movie's context. It earns Éowyn some more sympathy, and it establishes that Wormtongue is a sleazy little creep, but it does very little to make her out to be what she is in the books, a steel-spined lily. When she falls for Aragorn in the movies, they aren't able to clarify, as they can in the books, that it is because of admiration. It's because of his kingly, lordly stature. Besides, the Aragorn of the movies is a much less confident and much less kingly man, so it wouldn't make sense if she was. Instead, it just feels more like a sweet crush, like he's the handsome man who's swept in to save the day and he's all dark and mysterious, and honestly, with it being Viggo Mortensen, I really can't blame her. The limitations of film make this growing attraction far less nuanced, and it also fundamentally changes the way that the character will grow from here. In the books, this is the last that we see of Éowyn essentially until the third book. She is chosen to lead the people of Rohan to safety, while Theoden, Aragorn, and the other men go and fight at the Battle of the Hornburg. She promises to wait faithfully for their return, though it is a bitter pill to swallow. But you know what isn't bitter or hard to swallow? In fact, it's not a pill at all. This video's sponsor, AG1. As a hobbit, I do my very best to get in my square 6 meals a day, but every once in a while, I feel like I am not getting all of the nutrients that I need. But luckily, AG1 is there to fill out my micronutrient gaps. I've been loving using AG1 to start out my mornings. It means I get water first thing, and it helps with my energy. You just need to take 8 to 10 ounces of cold water, add in your powder, do it over a hard surface so you don't spill it all over yourself like I did. Shake and enjoy. AG1 contains vitamins and minerals optimized to support whole body health, including the gut, the brain, and the immune system. It's a great way to support your body's function, and it tastes pretty good too. They also sent me vitamin D3 K2 drops, which you can add to your AG1, and it's great because I certainly don't get out into the sun enough. If you couldn't tell. Head to the link in my description to get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 K2 and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase of AG1. Thank you so much to you guys for checking out my sponsors when I have them, and thank you so much to AG1 for supporting this channel. Éowyn returns to the story when Aragorn visits her while on his journey to Dunharrow. At first she's flattered and excited that he took out time to see her, but she quickly becomes upset when she learns that he is going on his way to the paths of the dead. He explains that he has no other choice. He has no great desire to ride into certain death, but he also doesn't think there's any other option. Éowyn considers this and then says that if he is going to go, he should at least take her with him. She wants to face this danger head on, but Aragorn tells her that her place is at home. Her duty is to care for her people, not to die for them. "Too often have I heard of duty," she cried. "But am I not of the house of Eorl, a shield maiden and not a dry nurse? I have waited on faltering feet long enough. Since they falter no longer, it seems, may I not now spend my life as I will? Shall I always be left behind when the riders depart, to mind the house while they win renown, and find food and beds when they return? A time may come soon," said he, "when none will return. Then there will be need of valor without renown, for none shall remember the deeds that are done in the last defense of your homes. Yet the deeds will not be less valiant because they are unpraised." And she answered, "All your words are but to say, you are a woman, and your part is in the house. But when the men have died in battle and honor, you have leave to be burned in the house, for the men will need it no more. But I am of the house of Eorl, and not a serving woman. I can ride and wield blade, and I do not fear either pain or death." "What do you fear, lady?" he said. "A cage," she said. "To stay behind bars until use and old age accept them, and all chance of doing great deeds is gone, beyond recall or desire." This is an incredibly dense, incredibly important conversation. Aragorn is arguing that she has sworn to protect her people, that staying at home and keeping the hearth warm and the house standing is just as valorous and brave as combat on the field of battle. Éowyn astutely responds that just because she is a woman, that doesn't mean that those tasks are inherently hers to bear. She can ride, she can fight, and she's been through enough battles on the sidelines to know that if the men fall in battle, the enemy will come to her doorstep. She fears that she will forever remain chained to the role of servant and nursemaid, that her fate will be defined by powerful men. She is a fighter, a warrior in her blood, and she wants a chance at the renown and respect that men have within their grasp. Aragorn insists that she should stay, that the danger he's facing in the south has nothing to do with her. She responds that there are plenty of men following him on this venture, and the same goes for them. It's not their battle to fight. They go only because they would not be parted from thee, because they love thee. This conversation builds out Éowyn's worldview and her relationship with Aragorn so well. She doesn't want to be a footnote in history, to be the one that kept the home safe and is never recognized for that. She wants to be important, to matter, to risk her own life for her kingdom, rather than relying on other people to do it for her. She hates that she has been assigned a single lot in life, with no hope for mobility. Certainly, it is vain to seek glory. She is prideful in her desire for significance. But she has been so wounded by this battle already. She's lost so much and feels so alone that the concept of dying in glory is far superior to rotting away in insignificance. Éowyn's love for Aragorn stems from this feeling. She sees him as everything that she wants to be, lordly, brave, the stuff of legends. If she were to become his wife, she would take on his significance. She would be the warrior queen of Gondor at his side on the throne and on the battlefield. She is seduced by his nobility in the same way that she is seduced by the blood-coated blade. In the movies, the heart of this conversation is spread out over numerous smaller scenes. Firstly, the one that happens between Éowyn and Aragorn right before they leave for Helm's Deep. Éowyn is practicing with her sword in the main hall when Aragorn comes over and praises her skill with the blade. She explains to him,
"The women of this country learned long ago. Those without swords can still die upon them. I fear neither death nor pain."
They sort of summarize the much larger scene that happens in the book, where Aragorn asks her what she fears, and she replies,
"A cage. To stay behind bars until use and old age accept them. And all chance of valor has gone beyond recall or desire."
This is a very slight change from the books. In the movies, she says that all chances at valor are lost, whereas in the books, she says that all chances of doing great deeds are lost. Desiring valor alone, to me, reads as much more vain. It is generally a more shallow desire to want praise. However, in the books, she wants to accomplish great deeds. She wants to do the things that earn the valor. She wants agency, the ability to determine her own fate. If she's gonna go down, she's gonna go down swinging. Again, it is a minor change in wording, but I think that the book has a little bit more nuance than the film version. More importantly, this much larger conversation that we have in the books changes very significantly when you pare it down to its snappiest lines. Now, for the sake of runtime and simplicity, I of course understand why they had to do that, but it does have some pretty serious implications on her character. The Éowyn of the books doesn't necessarily think that keeping the home safe is inherently less noble than going to battle. She just thinks that she is special. Her blood, her heritage has uniquely armed her to do something important to change the shape of this war, and if all of the men around her can throw their lives away into the war machine, why shouldn't she be allowed to do the same? By removing the context, the movies make it a much more simple message that she is just as powerful and just as competent as men, so she should be able to fight. Later on in the films, as Aragorn is trying to convince Éowyn to hide with the women and children at Helm's Deep, she argues,
"You do not command the others to stay. They fight beside you because they would not be parted from you, because they love you."
In the books, the line that this was adapted from is much more of a gotcha. It's a mic drop. It is her finally laying bare Aragorn's very real hypocrisy. She is confessing that she loves him, yes, but it's also her pointing out that her motivations for fighting, her desires, are on par with the desires and motivation of the men that follow Aragorn into battle. And they too would lash out if they were caged the way that she is. In the movies, this scene seems much more like a confession. She blurts it out accidentally in the heat of the moment and then apologizes and runs away right after. You don't really understand the inherent connection between her desire to go to war and her affection for Aragorn. It just seems like she wants to be considered equal to men, and also she has a crush on Aragorn, which, again, like, look at him. I get it. There's one more scene that's relevant here, and that is her conversation with Éomer in The Return of the King. Merry has been forbidden from riding into battle due to his inexperience and the fact that he's like 3 feet tall, but Éowyn tries to defend him.
Why should Merry be left behind? He has as much cause to go to war as you. Why can he not fight for those he loves?
Éomer responds by describing the horrors of the battlefield and concludes,
"War is the province of men, Éowyn."
While they are technically talking about Merry here, it's clear that there's a kind of doublespeak, that Éomer is also shutting down Éowyn's desire for agency. And the brevity of this conversation, as well as that final line, does imply that his primary reason is because of sexism. Éowyn can't fight because she's a woman. And of course, it's not super difficult to see why this simplification was made. The movies were written to be enjoyed by the widest possible range of people, from old to young, from vintage fans to brand new ones. And the idea that sexism would be present in a medieval-inspired, male-dominated society, it's a really easy sell, and it would make sense that Éowyn, who's very independent, would want to push against that. It's certainly an easier idea to get across than the concept that war must be approached with the correct intentions and dispositions, or else one risks losing their mortal soul in the fray of combat. The problem is then that that means that the movies have to justify Éowyn's position, since hopefully, we can all agree that sexism is bad. The books, though, aren't saying that Éowyn is right. They're just making her position understandable. Éowyn is not just willing to risk her life. She's not just brave. She is actively trying to get herself killed because she is so lost in hopelessness and despair. It is not a good thing that she wants to fight. In the movies, though, the simple framing of it as an issue of sexism means that there's not really any reason to condemn the decisions that she makes. These differences persist into the climax of her arc when she disguises herself as a man, rides into battle, and faces off against the Witch King of Angmar to protect Theoden. And in the films, this moment is a triumph. The evil villain cackles about the ancient prophecy that protects him, and Éowyn, in the ultimate girl power move, rips off her helmet and her hair comes streaming down, and of course she says,
I am no man.
And I can't deny, that's an incredibly satisfying moment. There's like wordplay, there's foreshadowing, and it's just such an epic, satisfying moment. It is the peak of her character. But in the books, while this moment is technically a victory, it's framed very differently. A sword rang as it was drawn. Do what you will, but I will hinder it if I may. Hinder me? Thou fool! No living man may hinder me. Then Merry heard of all sounds in that hour the strangest. It seemed that Durnhelm laughed, and the clear voice was like the ring of steel. But no living man am I. You look upon a woman. Éowyn am I, Éomen's daughter. You stand between me and my lord and kin. Begone if you be not deathless. For living or dark undead, I will smite you if you touch him. She slays him, but it is not the same glowing triumph as we get in the movies. Éowyn is making herself significant. The villain falls by her hand, but Merry observes that she has the face of one that goes seeking death, having no hope. The movie allows Éowyn to really have this moment. She gets to hold Theoden in her arms as he dies. He acknowledges that she saved him, and even though he will perish, because of her, he is able to die with honor and nobility. She then falls unconscious, mourning, but victorious. Meanwhile, in the books, Éowyn falls unconscious, and Theoden never even learns that it was she who saved him. When she wakes in the Houses of Healing, her life saved just by a hair by Aragorn, she is deeply bitter. Although she killed the Witch King, no one is praising her for it. In fact, she's more caged than she ever was, confined to bed, with little information on how the battle is turning outside her windows. She doesn't think that she'll ever be able to face Aragorn again, now knowing that he will never feel the same way about her as she feels about him. This is Éowyn's lowest point. Her attempts at lashing out towards freedom have left her more caged than ever. In this dark night of the soul, she finds Faramir. Faramir is like Aragorn in some ways, but he's also a very unique type of hero. Faramir doesn't see war as glorious or as empowering. He sees it as a necessary evil. War must be, while we defend our lives against a destroyer who would devour all. But I do not love the bright sword for its sharpness, nor the arrow for its swiftness, nor the warrior for his glory. I love only that which they defend. Faramir's quiet honor, his strong moral compass, and his firm grasp on hope seems to be just what Éowyn needed at that time. She allows herself to weep in front of him, and they cling to each other as the final battle unfolds. Faramir asks her if she loves him, and Éowyn says, "I wished to be loved by another," she answered, "but I desire no man's pity." "That I know," he said. "You desired to have the love of the Lord Aragorn. You wished to have renown and glory and to be lifted far above the mean things that crawl on the earth. But when he gave you only understanding and pity, then you desired to have nothing, unless a brave death in battle. Look at me, Éowyn." And Éowyn looked at Faramir long and steadily, and Faramir said, "I do not offer you my pity, for you are a lady high and valiant, and have yourself won renown that shall not be forgotten. And you are a lady beautiful, I deem, beyond even the words of the elven tongue to tell. And I love you. Once I pitied your sorrow, but now, were you sorrowless, without fear or any lack, were you the blissful queen of Gondor, still I would love you. Éowyn, do you not love me?" Then the heart of Éowyn changed, or else at last she understood it, and suddenly her winter passed and the sun shone on her. "I will be a shield maiden no longer, nor vie with the great riders, nor take joy only in the songs of slaying. I will be a healer, and love all things that grow and are not barren." And again she looked at Faramir. "No longer do I desire to be a queen," she said. In the books, Éowyn laying down her sword is a sign of healing. She realizes that there is something to live for, that she deserves love, not just pity or fear. Faramir offers her something that Aragorn never could, a place in society where she has respect, but also peace. This is an incredibly difficult character transformation to pull off, and Tolkien only barely managed to pull it off, in my opinion. It is a full character 360 that takes place in like 6 pages. It is a little bit, and then they lived happily ever after, but that doesn't mean that I still don't like it. It's terribly, wonderfully sweet, and honestly, I think it's probably the only way that Éowyn could have had a happy ending. Her whole character arc is that of a broken woman, lashing out in the hopes that she'll feel anything, just looking to find her place. And in the end, she does find her place, even if it is a bit rushed. Now, in the movies, they backed themselves into a bit of a corner when it came to her character resolution. They made Éowyn's journey one of empowerment against repressive systems. So Tolkien's conclusion of having her step back into a more submissive role, it would have undone all of the work that they had done to get her there. Because her crush on Aragorn was such a passionate thing, there was no way to neatly wrap up the ends of her broken heart. They ended up only really able to hint at how her character arc ends with a little musical sequence and a couple couple of scenes of her and Faramir meeting. They show the two of them together at the end of the movie, but if they had expressly come out and say that, oh yeah, and then Éowyn put down her sword and became a healer and never fought again for the rest of her life because her brand new boy toy told her not to, it may have felt like a couple of steps back in terms of the whole female empowerment thing. Tolkien's Éowyn was not intended to be a feminist character. Tolkien had a lot of opinions about gender roles, and romance that you'd kind of come to expect from a Christian male Oxford professor from the early 1900s. That being said, Éowyn still is a beautifully written character that tackles in an incredibly nuanced way ideas of depression, despair, pity, and hopelessness. Yes, she ends up as a healer and basically a servant, but that's also part of Tolkien's larger conversation in saying that there's nothing wrong with being a healer or a servant. What's important is that in the end, Éowyn comes around to choose this life rather than being caged into it. The movies, with less time to develop characters and less space for internal nuance, decided to make it a pretty simple story of empowerment. A woman learning and fighting for the fact that she is just as strong as the men around her. And as much of a change as this was, and a simplification, it was highly effective. Entire theaters of people will cheer when she kills the Witch King, and as a little girl who grew up watching these movies, she was such an important character to me. I think that it was a very important storyline to have in such a male-dominated narrative. Sure, it does fall apart a bit in the end, but in a movie as long and as multi-layered as The Return of the King, if there's like one storyline that doesn't wrap itself up in a perfect bow, you're not really gonna notice it the way that you might in a book. I definitely prefer the nuances of Book Éowyn, but I've gotta admit that it has taken me years to fully understand the complexity of her character. I say it in every one of these videos, but the mediums of film and literature are so different. You can create feats of image and sound. You can evoke emotions with movies in a very special way. Books allow for complexity and nuance that most movies will struggle to achieve. However, by comparing the two, especially with a character like Éowyn, you can see how these two mediums really can shine. Let me know in the comments which of these characters you prefer. I'm sure that most of you will agree with me that the book version is a little bit more carefully created, but there's such a fond place in my heart for that fiery, passionate character that we get to see in the movies. I mean, this scene will never not make me cry. Give this video a like if you learned something new, and subscribe if you want to get your weekly dose of nerddom from yours truly. My Patreon is linked below if you want to check that out, but just having you here is such a pleasure. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you have a very happy, hobbity day.